Hey there, folks. If you've ever visited Joshua Tree National Park, then you know it is a pretty incredible place. Sure, it's a desert environment, but the different cactuses, Joshua trees, and rock formations make for a truly unique and enjoyable experience. Unfortunately, it's also a pretty dangerous park, especially in the summer when temperatures regularly rise above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It seems like the heat and also sometimes the confusing terrain are the cause of people getting lost or disappearing in the park. The case I want to highlight in this video is that of Paul Miller, a man who disappeared on what otherwise appears to be a simple out-and-back trail on the northern edge of the park. This case stumped searchers for a couple of years, and I was always curious why. When you're dealing with temperatures in excess of 100 degrees, a person can only go so far before hyperthermia and dehydration get them. So if someone disappears in such conditions, you might expect the search area to be somewhat smaller than one that takes place in a more moderate location. That's where things like terrain come in. How easy is it to traverse the search area in question? Some people might think that it would be a whole lot easier to not have to deal with the thick trees and brush of a forest. And sure, that's true in a sense, but Joshua Tree presents its own challenges with endless boulders and rock formations. And of course, I already mentioned the heat, which affects searchers just as much as anyone else. As we have learned in the past from other cases in Joshua Tree, like that of Bill Owasco, this park can be a bit deceiving and hide the location of remains for well over a decade, as was the case for Mr. Owasco. So let's find out exactly what happened to Paul Miller on his last hike in Joshua Tree National Park. But real quick, before we dive into all that, I know you can't smell me right now, but if you could, you would detect hints of cedar, pine sap, maybe a dash of sage or citrus. Everyone likes to smell nice, and it's always been a personal goal of mine to find a scent that can genuinely mimic the smell of a ponderosa pine forest on a hot summer day in the fresh mountain air. It's a difficult scent to simulate or even to find, but the best thing out there on the market to help you find the scent you are looking for, your personal favorite, is Scentbird. Scentbird is a monthly subscription service that allows you to choose from over 700 different fragrances, including popular brands like Versace and Gucci. Each month, you'll receive your choice of 1 to 3 vials of your chosen fragrances delivered right to your door. The scent comes in its own atomizer, ready to spray. Each vial should last you about 30 days, so you have time to test it out, see if you like it, or continue trying new fragrances from their massive selection. This month I received Rebel Thorn, Versace Eros, Rowan Mountain Memories, and Gucci Guilty. I personally found that the Mountain Memories fragrance lived up to the name. Scent has the ability to evoke a certain place, time, or feel, and it's different for everyone. What makes Scentbird great is the affordability. You could easily spend a few $100s when purchasing a bottle of some of the more popular brands out there. Scentbird allows you to try many of those fragrances for a fraction of the price, and you get to really try them out and see how you enjoy them in your day-to-day life. Right now, Scentbird is offering a great deal on their service. You can either scan the QR code on screen or use promo code Enigma to get 55% off your first month of Scentbird. You can get your first fragrance for just $8, and the next month will be only $16.95. Again, use the promo code Enigma on Scentbird's website to get 55% off your first month. So thank you to Scentbird for sponsoring this video. "51-year-old Paul Miller and his wife Stephanie were residents of Ontario, Canada. Paul was an avid outdoorsman who loved kayaking, camping, hiking, and traveling in general. He was known to his family to be a strong hiker and fast on the trail. He could sometimes get distracted easily taking pictures of nature, which was another hobby of his. Both Paul and his wife had this adventurous outdoor spirit, with Paul even proposing to her from within a canoe. Then, later celebrating their wedding by parachute jumping the day before the ceremony. By 2018, they had been married for 26 years. They had children by this time, Dryden and Tiana, whom Paul raised to appreciate nature in the same fashion that he did. He was, by all accounts, a man who surrounded himself with his family and friends. July of 2018 is the pivotal point in this story, as Paul had recently turned 51, and he and his wife had recently celebrated their 26th anniversary, and Stephanie had successfully secured a full-time teaching contract for September of that year. The duo decided they wanted to take a long vacation together, and it would also be the first holiday without both of their children. The region they most wanted to visit was the American Southwest, within which they had a long list of desired locales to visit. Paul always wanted to see the Grand Canyon, Bryce Canyon, Zion, and Joshua Tree National Parks. So they set out for Las Vegas with all of their camping equipment and plenty of excitement. They hit all of these parks in turn, with Joshua Tree being the last on the list. It was to be a fitting end to the trip, as Joshua Tree was also the one place Paul was most excited to see. Together, Paul and Stephanie spent several days hiking amongst the rocky desert trails of the park. They hit Skull Rock, Hall of Horrors, Hidden Valley, Barker Dam, and the Chala Cactus Gardens. Paul was particularly interested in the bighorn sheep and spent time taking pictures of the animals with his Nikon camera. Based on this recent experience, it is safe to assume that Paul was well aware of what it was like to hike in the park, especially in the summer when temperatures are high. On July 12th, the couple booked a hotel room at a Motel 6 in the town of 29 Palms on the northern edge of the park. They were just looking for a place to clean up, relax, and pack before heading back to Las Vegas and catching a flight home the next day. On the morning of July 13th, Paul and his wife were still in 29 Palms at their motel. They had breakfast together at a Denny's around 7:30 a.m., and Paul brought up the idea that there was still time for one more hike on the 49 Palms Oasis Trail, as it was just up the road from the Motel 6. The hike is a 3-mile round trip with minor elevation gain. It has the typical Joshua Tree terrain of lots of rocks, boulders, and cactuses. The highlight is a small spring oasis surrounded by palm trees. It is considered a fairly strenuous hike, mostly depending on the weather and heat conditions, and the average time to complete is somewhere around 1 and 2 hours. Of course, this always depends on the strength of the hiker and the trail conditions. Paul estimated it would take him 60 to 90 minutes, during which time he was hoping to see and photograph more bighorn sheep. Stephanie was not particularly interested in joining Paul on the hike, however, instead deciding to stay behind at the hotel and finish packing their bags. At approximately 8:30 to 9 a.m., Paul left his Motel 6 room in 29 Palms and traveled to the 49 Palms Oasis trailhead alone. His plan was to be back before the 11 a.m. hotel checkout time, and in his haste to get there and get it done quick, he forgot to grab his wallet and his cell phone. Though apparently this was not necessarily an unusual thing for Paul to do. Paul did take a backpack with 2 to 3 liters of water and a camelback. This is important because the temperatures in Joshua Tree in July get dangerously hot and are regularly over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. He also took some protein bars, his camera, proper footwear, and a hat. He was wearing a dark shirt and shorts and driving a tan sedan rental car. Roughly 2 hours later, around 10:30 a.m., Stephanie was beginning to get concerned. She knew her husband was a swift hiker who could normally tackle a 3-mile trail with ease. Still, she realized it was not quite time to be seriously worried that something bad had occurred. That time came as 11 a.m. rolled around, and it was time to check out from the Motel 6. She immediately had a feeling of dread and anxiety, which eventually prompted her to head to the nearest park office and report her concerns around 11:30 a.m. Normally, park rangers might not necessarily consider a hiker being overdue by 30 minutes as a very serious situation, but Paul's case was different for a few reasons. By 12 p.m., temperatures on the trail were already around 100 degrees, which is terrible to hike in. If someone gets caught in temperatures like that, you need to get to them much faster than you would in a more moderately temperatured area. The Park Service also learned that Paul had a plane to catch that day, so there was ample reason to assume that Paul knew and would try to complete the hike as fast as possible. So where was he? Everything indicated that Paul being even a little bit overdue could mean a serious situation was taking place. Park Ranger Mo would arrive on scene at the 49 Palms Canyon trailhead shortly after 11:45 a.m. There were only 2 cars in the parking lot, a tan Hyundai sedan registered to the Hertz rental car company, and a blue Audi sedan registered to a private citizen. The ranger checked the interior of the tan sedan and noticed a partially filled water container and a red hat on the passenger seat. Park Ranger Ash then arrived and conducted a search urgency assessment and concluded a measured response was required based upon the information they had at the time. Basically, they were not ready to call in every available resource just yet. Rangers Ash and Mo immediately searched the 49 Palms Oasis Trail from the trailhead to the trail's end at the 49 Palms Oasis. As the Rangers approached the oasis, they encountered a white male adult hiking in the other direction. The man said that he drove a blue Audi sedan and he had not seen any other people during his hike. The two Rangers then continued on to the oasis where they conducted a brief search of the immediate area. Ranger Ash then started heading back to the trailhead while Ranger Mo went off trail down the 49 Palms Canyon to the park boundary where Ranger Ash was going to pick him up in a vehicle. After completion of their search, the Rangers requested a full search and rescue response. A command post was set up in the trailhead parking lot while they awaited more personnel. More searchers would not arrive until around 4 p.m. This included search dogs and a helicopter from San Bernardino County. It is very common for the San Bernardino County Sheriff to show up and assist the park. The search lasted until 10:30 p.m. Rangers were assigned to overnight security of the trailhead. Some search notes from this day indicate that people were having great difficulty with the terrain, noting that it was very rugged with too many hiding spaces and too many places to fall or hurt yourself. They also found some fresh mountain lion tracks. Search operations continued on Saturday, July 15th at 5:30 in the morning. Search dogs, ATVs, air resources, and ground searchers from both the Park Service and San Bernardino showed up. Additional personnel were requested from surrounding parks like Death Valley and Mojave. Temperatures at the time were in excess of 100 degrees, so the actual search operations were reduced during the hours between noon and 4 p.m. to mitigate the risk of heat exhaustion among the crew. So between Friday and Saturday, 3 heat casualties occurred, which were either treated in the field or at the command post. None of them required hospitalization. On most days, searchers were only allowed to be out in the open for 2 hours at a time due to the heat. Paul's wife was interviewed to see if they could glean anything useful in the search. She said it was common for Paul to hike by himself, and it was not unusual for him to leave his phone and wallet behind. She said he is adventurous and would follow a bighorn sheep off trail in order to get a good picture. He is good at land navigation and has experience hiking in remote locations. She said that the longest distance her husband had ever covered in one day of hiking was around 20 miles, which is pretty good. She added that Paul was not overly familiar with the desert terrain and would probably keep walking if he was lost in order to find his own way out. Rangers were able to get in touch with Paul's son as well, who added that he knew of 2 times in the past that Paul got lost on a hike. His son believed that Paul would capably handle the rough off-trail terrain of Joshua Tree. Rangers also spoke with some of Paul's friends to get a better idea of his state of mind leading up to the disappearance. None of them reported any issues or red flags. Everything seemed perfectly fine leading up to that last day in Joshua Tree. Eventually, a potential witness contacted the Park Service stating that they thought they might have seen Paul in the 49 Palms Oasis Trail on July 14th, the day after he disappeared. And I have to think that this is either a typo or the witness did say the 14th but actually meant the 13th. Obviously, the day after the disappearance, the trail was most likely closed and crawling with search and rescue personnel. Anyway, the witness said they arrived at the oasis at 8:30 a.m. and started hiking back to the trailhead around 8:45. The witness said that he saw a man hiking on the trail by himself and that it appeared to be Paul Miller. The witness reportedly saw that Paul was hiking quickly, as though he was a man on a mission, which would fit because he did have a flight to catch. He said that Paul looked hot, but was otherwise in good shape. They spoke for a brief moment before continuing on. The time at which this encounter took place was around 9 a.m., plus or minus 15 minutes. This time frame would fit with the time that Paul likely arrived at the trailhead. The location was about 3/4 of a mile from the trailhead itself. The witness said that the man had a smaller dark backpack and a dark baseball cap. He said he also saw a group of 2 males and 2 females hiking into the oasis as he was leaving. When he made it back to the trailhead around 9:30 a.m., he remembered seeing 2 vehicles in the parking lot, a large van and a sedan that he thought was either black or gray. After 5 days of searching in extreme temperatures, the operation was officially ended. This occurred mostly because of safety concerns, but the search would have also turned into a recovery rather than a rescue, as Paul did not have the means and resources to survive the 100-degree heat for 5 days. Wherever he was, they were almost certain that he was deceased. The conditions on this search were, without a doubt, terrible. Anyone who has gone hiking in such heat would know this. Having to do that hiking in off-trail and boulder-strewn areas makes it all the worse. While much of the searching did take place in the early morning before the sun came up, that would also present certain challenges due to the lack of light. So the search was called off, and Paul Miller was still out there somewhere. On July 26th, with the search turning out to be a complete failure, a report was issued that outlined the disappearance and search efforts, but also listed likely scenarios for what could have happened. At the top of that list, with a high likelihood, was a scenario where Paul traveled off-trail around 1 mile south of the trailhead in order to photograph bighorn sheep. He then fell while not paying attention and was injured to a degree that he became immobile or unconscious. He then succumbed to the extreme heat. They believed that photographers were more likely to take chances and enter risky terrain to obtain the perfect shot, a sentiment that I actually tend to agree with. The area where Paul disappeared was steep and dangerous, and they note that a standard camera can disorient the operator and cause them to fall while using it. They also note Paul's propensity to move off trail based on prior testimony from his relatives. Another scenario that they believed had a medium likelihood was one where Paul did not turn around at the oasis and instead continued south into a drainage and went further southwest before dying from heat-related illness. The lowest likelihood scenarios were foul play and despondence due to a relationship event. There was simply no evidence to support either of those theories. The report also outlined 3 areas where Paul would most likely be found. Those are area segments E1, F1, and F2. This is mostly just an educated guess based on all of the available evidence. You notice that it mainly singles out segments on either side of the Oasis Trail, about 3/4 of a mile to a mile from the trailhead itself, which is roughly the area where the one and only witness saw Paul hiking. The case file shows that some additional searching took place in the months after Paul disappeared. It almost always involved only a handful of personnel with limited resources, but still there were attempts. Let's go over some of these efforts. On August 5th, a search began early in the morning with support and advice from Nevada State Search and Rescue. Ground searchers and canines began at the oasis and started working the trail back to the parking area. A nearby hill area was searched because ravens and buzzards were seen circling the area. Nothing was found at the time. The only thing of note was some canine interest about 1/4 of a mile up the trail from the trailhead. All units were done searching by 9:30 a.m. On August 6th, 5 searchers and a canine were used to search the area 1/4 of a mile from the trailhead where the dogs had shown interest the day before. No further clues were found, but the canine continued to show interest in this particular area. Search efforts continued on August 12th, early in the morning, to once again follow up on the clues found during previous searches. Once again, despite skilled personnel on scene, nothing was found that helped further the investigation. On September 9th, a small group of searchers decided to take a new direction and look into some shelters and caves that were known to be in the region, in case Paul had found one and decided to take cover there. Due to a lack of personnel, only 5 people were available, and nobody was able to complete their assigned search segments, and no clues were found. Beginning in November of 2018, it was pretty much only family members and friends who went into Joshua Tree to search for Paul. They were accompanied by some members of Joshua Tree Search and Rescue, but in an unofficial capacity. They donated their time to the cause. They were able to use GPX tracks of the areas that had already been searched by the MPS and other authorities. This allowed them to focus on new areas of interest, but being on the ground in the area just made them more aware of what a difficult task it was to conduct searches in this kind of terrain. Still, they pressed on, putting up posters around the park and nearby towns, and doing their best to alert hikers to be on the lookout for any clues. On December 6th, an individual contacted the Park Service regarding an unknown rib cage that had been found in the 49 Palms Oasis. When a ranger arrived in the area, he was shown photos of a spinal column. The following day, authorities would hike out to the location of the discovery. Photographs were taken of the bones, which were then sent out to a coroner to be identified. It was later determined that they were not human. Paul's sister Dawn went on a podcast and did everything she could to bring media attention to her brother's disappearance. She did not want the case to be forgotten. Her efforts appeared to work as it brought the Sierra Madre SAR team into the area to perform a search as a training exercise. Dawn had been pushing the park to allow a drone search of the 49 Palms area because it was so difficult to get around and there were other places that seemed inaccessible. It is illegal to fly drones within a national park, but you can get permission to do it. Unfortunately, it seems to be a very rare thing for the Park Service to grant such permission. Dawn describes her effort to get drones involved as an uphill battle, but she eventually found a team of SAR drone operators known as Western States Aerial Search. This organization applied for a special use permit and was able to get their request expedited. It was granted in November of 2019, well over a year after Paul's disappearance. The plan was to fly 3 to 4 drones for 3 days, which would cover a vast area of land. What the drones are doing is flying over the search area and taking thousands of high-resolution pictures. Once they do that, a difficult and tedious task begins in which people comb through the photographs looking for anomalies. Though these days I've increasingly seen that organizations can use AI to comb through these photos looking for anomalies, which probably expedites the process by a great deal. In Paul's case, it was December of 2019 when one of these technicians found an anomaly amongst these drone photos. On December 19, 2019, the Park Service was contacted about following up on a lead discovered in a drone photograph provided by a private group. The aerial picture appeared to show a light-colored object, which appeared to be a human femur bone. Unfortunately, the actual photo is not included in the park file. The object was photographed near the 49 Palms Oasis and was well within the search area for Paul Miller. For reasons I cannot comprehend, the actual coordinates of the find are redacted based on exemptions that clearly do not apply. I think this is actually the first time I've received redacted coordinates, in fact. The inconsistency of the Park Service is somewhat astounding at times. Anyway, instead we're going to use the description of how searchers got there to build a pretty clear idea of the location. This will be based upon the report the Park Service issued and also a description written by Paul's sister, Dawn. The park personnel hiked out to this location on December 20th at 2 p.m. They say that they started at the 49 Palms trailhead and made their way toward the coordinates. They later decided to hike down a drainage from the ridgeline on the trail and go downhill towards their target. This drainage reportedly went in a southeasterly direction. While in the drainage around 3:30 p.m., they located a pair of dark-colored cargo shorts which were under several large rocks, and also partially buried in sand. The shorts were covered in dirt and tattered and torn in several locations. They were a size 32 and the maker's tag indicated they were manufactured in Canada. Nothing was found in the pockets. The rangers put the shorts in an evidence bag. Further down the drainage around 3:45 p.m., one of the rangers located a boot under several large rocks. The boot was very worn and appeared to be a military style size 9. The shoe was tan and there was no identifiable marks on it. The coordinates of the boot are redacted as well. They then put the boot in an evidence bag. As the team approached the lower section of the drainage near the coordinates they were en route to, they observed what looked to be a partial human spine lying in the desert sand. The time was roughly 4 p.m. Okay, so that was the description from the Park Service, so let's compare that to Dawn's description. Dawn says that Paul was found hidden in the back of a crevice partway down the main wash leading from the oasis and towards town, and town would be 29 Palms. Okay, So while that's not a lot of information, it's still very helpful. There is a very clear drainage or wash heading from the 49 Palms Oasis and going north-northeast up toward town. Basically, Paul was still close to the end of the trail. There are two branches that lead into the wash, and based on the NPS report, I would think that the rangers started finding the clothes and boot along this drainage as it heads in a southeasterly direction. I think they then connected with the main wash here, where they found the rest of the remains. So while the exact location is unknown, we do have a general idea. He was probably found in this drainage. The bones that were initially discovered, which included a spine and femur, were photographed by the recovery team. At around 4:10 p.m., they found a human skull lying on the open ground. The mandible was missing. A purple and gray Osprey backpack was about 10 feet from the skull and in an upright position. The backpack contained the Hyundai rental car keys, the Nikon camera, a roll of toilet paper, a sandal, a Cliff Bar, and about a half-liter to 1 liter of water in a Camelback-style water bladder. Unfortunately, they either didn't take many pictures of the area or they just decided not to give me all they had. Both are possible. Still, we can get an idea of this crevice that Paul's remains were found in. After rangers inventoried the backpack, they continued searching the area and found several other bones which appeared to be human remains. After reporting in to the chief ranger and also contacting San Bernardino County, the team left the area around 4:30 p.m. The case was then transferred to the San Bernardino County Sheriff, who returned to the scene on December 21st with a coroner who documented the scene and removed the remains. The reason I don't have any information from them is because San Bernardino is the least transparent county I have ever encountered in the entire country, who blatantly violate California's transparency laws and then challenge you to take them to court because they know you won't and can't afford it. But that's just my opinion. Not gonna lie, California in general is absolutely terrible when it comes to releasing records, which is kind of funny when you think about it. But San Bernardino County just takes it to another level. Anyway, I'll end this rant. We probably wouldn't have learned much from them anyway. There is actually a lot more to be learned outside of what authorities had. For example, according to Paul's sister Dawn, his camera was found inside his backpack and intact. The photographs on the camera actually help piece together some of Paul's journey. Unfortunately, I do not have the photos themselves. Dawn said that the photos showed that Paul did make it to the oasis itself, and that he was on his way back to the parking lot when something happened. Paul decided to go off trail. Maybe he saw a bighorn sheep, or maybe it was some other reason. Dawn said that when she went to the oasis herself, she noticed hikers sometimes accidentally following an animal trail down the main wash, but she said that most of the time these people turned around after the trail petered out. This is a fairly common thing. Sometimes a wash or a ravine can appear to be a trail. Sometimes animal trails can appear to be a trail. These things sometimes throw people off, but usually just for a little while, as people typically discover these things are not built or maintained by human hands. Still, Dawn was confused because Paul's last photographs show that he was well past that section of the actual trail, but she surmises that he might have gone back to it. That's a bit of a sticking point. If Paul was in a hurry, would he really delay himself so much that he would backtrack on the trail? I suppose it's possible if he really wanted to get a picture of a certain animal, but it feels a little unlikely. Dawn states that the coroner found no evidence that Paul had fallen from the cliffs and ridges above the wash. Instead, it appeared he had sought shelter from the sun in the only shady area he could find, a rocky crevice. She goes on to state that she believes whatever happened to Paul happened quickly, as there was still quite a bit of water in his camelback. She believes that he might have had some kind of medical emergency, like a cardiac event, and then died from the heat within the first few hours. Whatever drove Paul off trail will never be known. Dawn wonders if he might have already been experiencing confusion from hyperthermia. I think all of her points are absolutely valid. I was thinking about all the exact same things before I encountered her online post about Paul's death. If he died with a liter of water still on him, then it seems like there was something else going on that we don't quite know about. The fact that they only found a few bones means that determining a cause of death is pretty much impossible. I mean, He probably died from the heat, but if there was some other factor, like a heart attack, we would never know at this point. Don states that the only reasons the drones were able to locate him is because scavenger animals had pulled some of his remains away from the crevice where he was sheltered. The unfortunate part is that Don, and probably many others, passed within 60 feet of this spot during the many searches that took place. The issue was that everyone's greatest fear that he was in some rocky crevice was true. Even if they put up drones right off the bat, it probably wouldn't have helped. There was just too many boulders and too many crevices for people to search on foot. Now, I actually went to Joshua Tree National Park because I was interested in walking the trail and finding out what could have happened to Paul Miller. At the time, it was the summer of 2024. I had a lot of information from the NPS about the disappearance and search. The problem was, nothing in their files said anything about Paul ever being found. I got that information after my visit when I petitioned the NPS once again for that very specific information. So when I went to Joshua Tree, I knew that Paul had obviously gone off trail somewhere, and I was curious to see what the trail actually looked like and how easy it would be to get lost on it. Unfortunately, for this hike I was running on a tight schedule. That day I had just come from Arizona. The plan was to stop and hike in Joshua Tree and then drive out to Los Angeles. So sadly, I wasn't even in Joshua Tree for a whole day. I really want to go back someday because it is a beautiful park. Anyway, I wasn't too concerned about the time constraint because I was planning on doing the trail really fast, kind of like Paul. The thing I was most concerned about was the extreme heat, which I was fully anticipating to be in the high 90s, but more likely well over 100 degrees. I was expecting it to be dangerously hot, like it often is in the summer. Would it have been awful driving to LA drenched in sweat? Probably, but sometimes I don't consider things like that at the time. I know this is kind of a long preamble to the footage, but it is necessary. Initially, I thought I would not actually be showing any of this footage. Why? Because my hike to 49 Palms Oasis was an utter failure. How can that be, you might ask? Well, an event occurred during the tiny space of time that I even planned to be in the park, an event I never even considered or imagined. This is why I'm going to include this footage in the video, because it is a perfect example of how you can plan and prepare. You can come with GPS and a personal locator beacon and all the necessary water, everything you would think you would need, and somehow still wind up in a dangerous situation that could ruin your day or, God forbid, take your life. So I'll let the footage speak for itself and play out exactly as it happened. As I was driving up to the 49 Palms trailhead, something unexpected happened. It started raining a bit, but just a little. It was really only a sprinkle. By the time I got to the parking lot itself, it was pouring rain. It was around this time that I started to notice the raindrops were rather large as well. Being from Washington State, I'm very familiar with rain. The size of these drops were like 5 times bigger than Washington rain. So I had to go back to my vehicle to put a plastic bag over my camera. For my mic, there really wasn't anything to be done. For that reason, I figured I would wait in the car for a minute and see if the rain would stop suddenly. Sometimes these types of showers just go away almost as soon as they show up. But the rain continued. Being used to rain, I figured the hell with it. We're just gonna get wet on this hike. Why not, right? Doing the hike in the rain while it's like 60 degrees is pretty much like hiking in Washington on any given day, except it's usually not even that warm. It was also around this time that I ran into a park ranger who had just arrived in the parking lot. He surprisingly recognized me from this channel almost immediately. I think he said he was watching one of my videos like right before he arrived in the parking area, so a big shout out to you, my friend, if you're watching this. I also love and appreciate meeting any park ranger, and you were super cool. Anyway, I'm not mentioning him for no reason because just in the time I was talking to him, the rain started getting real bad. Like there was so much water pouring off my brow, it was getting hard to see him standing there in front of me. I asked him if this was normal and if he had seen anything like it. He said he hadn't and that it was very unusual. We parted ways there as we were both completely soaked to the bone, and I got back to my car and the ranger just up and left the area. Frankly, I probably should have taken a hint from him because he had obviously come there with a plan to do something, but he got out of there almost immediately. Me being the stubborn bastard that I am, I didn't want to leave without getting something more from this place. This kind of rain was not something I had planned for, so after waiting a minute, I figured I would just get back out there and do this thing in the rain on the ground that was quickly turning into an absolute mud pit. Fortunately for me, the rain died down quite a bit. The sky was still cloudy, but the temperature was shockingly moderate compared to what I was expecting. Everything seemed to be looking up. I began doing my usual thing, taking some photographs, getting some B-roll of cactuses and signage. I figured things were going to go even better than I had anticipated. Well, this is not the video I thought I was going to make today. Here at the 49 Palms Oasis trailhead. I'm actually out on the trail a little bit. When I was in town, it was like 103 degrees, sunny, way too hot. And I thought I was going to have to come out here and not go very far, because just when Paul Miller was here, and the heat is probably what killed him, almost certainly. And I didn't want my fate to be anything similar to that. But I get out to the trailhead here, and I meet a kind ranger, by the way. Shout out to you, sir. I won't say your name, but it was good meeting you. And I'm sorry our conversation was cut short because a dark cloud suddenly made its way overhead. And then a monsoon just started showering this entire area with so much water I was drenched in a second. And this whole area is cooled off now. It's actually really nice to be out here. And the dark cloud is still here, but the rain has kind of stopped. There was a lot of thunder. I didn't see any lightning, so I'm not too concerned at the moment, but absolutely wild. I mean, the moment I get here to this trailhead, after getting into Joshua Tree and 29 Palms, a monsoon just starts showering this place. And I mean, this whole area is drenched. There's puddles in the desert. Unbelievable timing, really. And so I decided to just kind of wait around until I found a good gap in the rainfall to kind of come out here and do some filming and hopefully not get too drenched myself. And there's some thunder again, so I'm gonna play it by ear and kind of see what I can get filmed out here. And it's kind of nice to have to not worry about it being so hot, but you know, when you got storms, it's a kind of a worry of another sort. So we'll see what's happening. So, as we know, Paul Miller, he was with his wife visiting numerous national parks in the Southwest. Got Zion, Grand Canyon, Bryce Canyon, and he was really looking forward to Joshua Tree. And he did numerous hikes in this area with his wife. Everything went well. The whole trip was going well. This is something he had wanted to do his whole life. And the last day, the day he was supposed to leave, take a plane back home, he decides to do one last hike in Joshua Tree. This hike, this trail I'm on right now, 49 Palms Oasis Trail. And as you can see, yes, there's now puddles in the desert. Wild weather today, really wild. Anyway, he came out on this hike. He knew it was 3 miles in and out. It was close to his hotel. Should have been easy. He was a fit guy. He was so confident, though, that he left his phone and other helpful items at the hotel. He just took 3 liters of water and went out solo on this hike. Hot day. Kind of a recipe for disaster, but at the same time, I get where he was coming from. He was close to the hotel. This is a 3-mile hike. The trail's pretty obvious. So what was there to worry about? Well, as we know, something happened, and we know he made it to the oasis. It's pretty crazy thunder happening, but I doubt you can hear it on my mic. Well, he made it to the oasis and started heading back. And at some point he got off trail, and that's where this story stops making sense. Because there are areas that you can go off trail here where it kind of looks like there's a trail and then it kind of peters out. Apparently he had already passed those areas though. And so it didn't make any sense why he had gone off trail in the area that he did. And we're kind of left with a bit of a mystery because all we know is that he went off trail and got lost and then found a crevice to hide from the sun and died in there from something. Well, it already appears that the rain is starting to come back. Starting to hit me again. It's funny, I thought the problem with me being here today would be the heat. And I thought I'd kind of have to jump out and do this little bit on the trail and kind of show you around and then get back in the car to get to the AC. Instead, I'm escaping complete drenching of myself and my equipment. Kind of funny how things work out. But the real mystery here, as I was saying, is that we don't know how Paul Miller got off trail. Experienced hiker, this trail should be fairly easy to follow. It is classified as strenuous, but again, it's pretty short. The most dangerous part of this whole trail is the heat, which again is what I thought I would have to contend with walking on it today, but no, instead I'm dealing with monsoon weather. Pretty wild. So, I mean, this area is beautiful and it seems like it'd be really fun to kind of explore here if it wasn't so rainy or hot or, you know, apparently has to be one or the other extreme. I don't know. I actually really like it here. The rocks and everything are great. I'm sure it's a real hell to have to do a search and rescue in. It's one of those where I don't think we'll ever really know the full story. You know, did Paul Miller simply get lost? Apparently he had water still left in his water bladder or whatever he was using, which makes you wonder if he was having some other sort of emergency, whether that be, I don't know, a cardiac emergency, who knows, that forced him to kind of seek shelter somewhere in a crevice where, you know, apparently searchers had gotten real close to looking in there or had walked near it, but no one had really scoped it out real well, and they kind of passed him up on numerous occasions, which is kind of common. So, and here I am, I'm trying to not get my equipment wet as I'm starting to get a little bit drenched out here. Again, I am in the desert, make no mistake about it. I'm sure the cactuses out here are real happy with what's going on. You know, when you do these things, they hardly ever go to plan, I gotta say. Something weird always happens, but gotta be prepared for it. You know, being from Washington, I certainly prefer the rain to the heat, but with a big storm up in the sky right now, really loud thunder, still haven't seen lightning, but I gotta get out of this rain. I'll do my best to wait again and hopefully get some more footage of this area, but I gotta rush back to the car now, so stay tuned. But soon after, the weather changed again. That's when the hail came. Large, peppering pieces of hail. So I'm kind of taking cover in this little restroom stall they got out here from the rain. Now, I'm not hiding from the rain. I'm hiding my equipment from the rain, because when I came out here, I did not think that water was going to be an issue with the equipment I brought. I figured it was going to be the sun, you know. things overheating, not my stuff getting wet. So, if I had a little more forethought, I guess, I would be out there in the rain, because I don't mind getting a little soak on, but I really can't afford to have any of this equipment ruined. My goodness, it's really coming down right now. This is wild. To be honest with you, I'm a little concerned because I did see a family pull up here. They looked like they were maybe coming from another country, and they kind of walked off down the trail here, and I'm not sure if they really knew what to expect. At least I guess they're not dealing with the sun. They're dealing with this crazy rain. But I don't know, sometimes when I see people walking off unprepared, no backpack or nothing with them, I go, oh dear. Make a mental note of it and kind of keep an eye out for it. I don't know. One of those things. But again, I'm going to try and wait this out because I would like to get a little more footage here of Joshua Tree since I came all the way out here to do it. But goodness, wasn't expecting this. Okay, so I realized my plans were kaput, the hike was over, I was screwed, it was time to call it quits. It wouldn't be the first time things don't go according to plan on this channel when I'm out trying to film on a trail. There was just nothing to be done. I had to be in LA later in the day. I didn't have the time to wait and see when this rain and hail would let up. It was just one of those things that happens. I gotta say though, as I was leaving the parking lot, I wasn't too disappointed. The brief time I'd spent in Joshua Tree was a blast. The weather was perfectly moderate. It was fun running around up on those hills and the rocks and checking out the cactuses. It really made me want to come back. It's probably because I live in an environment that's the exact opposite of Joshua Tree, but as of now, Joshua Tree is the park I would most like to revisit, and this story is hardly over. It's a pretty short drive back into 29 Palms, and at first everything was fine. It was pretty rainy, but nothing I hadn't seen before. Then it got much worse. The rain started pouring so hard that the windshield wipers couldn't keep up with it, and I started to notice that there was something wrong with the asphalt on the road. It looked all weird. It took a moment for me to realize that I couldn't see the road at all because it was just a river of moving water. That's when I started having a oh damn moment. Mind you, the rain and hail were hitting the car so hard that you wouldn't be able to hear someone speak. Very luckily, I made it into town and saw that the main street was just a river as well. I saw to my right that there was like a vet or an animal clinic building that was sitting on some higher ground, so I pulled into there to wait. A few other drivers saw that and started doing the same thing because these roads were just getting nuts. So a group of us just kind of sheltered up in this bit of high ground. It didn't get us out of the crazy rain and massive hail, but the place had gone from a desert town to a flooded town in an instant, it seemed. And that's about the time I got an emergency alert on my phone saying to get to high ground as life-threatening floods were taking place. I mean, that was obvious, but getting the text just made it feel a little bit more serious. Once I saw that I was safe from the water and on high ground, I thought everything was good, but then the hail started getting worse, and the hail was about the size of a quarter, and my car started sounding like it was being hit by a machine gun. I was certain that the windows were going to break, but they didn't. They held. And the hail did leave about 1,000 little dents in the body of my vehicle, though. And you might ask yourself, why don't I have more footage of this sudden monsoon? Well, the fact is that while this was happening, I was solely focused on either driving or what was going on around me. I was seeing mailboxes and asphalt being torn up by rushing waters that appeared out of nowhere. I mean, again, this place was a desert, dry as a bone just minutes before, and all of a sudden there's a river going down Main Street, and all of the cars are just looking for high ground. Filming was just the last thing on my mind during this emergency, and by the time it even occurred to me to catch this stuff on camera, most of the danger was gone, and a cavalcade of sirens was heading towards 29 Palms. This monsoon was apparently the worst this town had seen in most folks' lives. I haven't heard of a person yet who had seen a worse one. It came absolutely out of nowhere. I mean, one moment it was clear skies and 90 degrees, and then it was suddenly 50 degrees with massive raindrops and eventually hail. It absolutely destroyed parts of 29 Palms. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to leave because the asphalt on the road was so tore up and spread out everywhere. Many people posted videos showing the damage it caused and how bad the flooding was. It destroyed people's homes, the roads, their cars. It was just crazy to me to be there when this thing hit this poor town. When I got back to the road and did some bobbing and weaving to avoid all the debris that was on the ground, I probably only went maybe 10 minutes down the road and made it to another town where they didn't even know anything was wrong, except for a line of police and fire trucks and ambulances that were all heading towards 29 Palms. This monsoon just swept in and wrecked the place for a good 20 to 30 minutes or something. I don't even know how long it lasted before heading out into the desert again, but it was pretty incredible. So while my on-the-trail footage was severely lacking, and I do apologize for that, I think this is actually a good example of how quickly things like weather can change. I mean, I was prepared for just about everything on that hike, but a monsoon. I was just lucky enough to win the lottery and get one. I mean, what are the odds that me, the missing Enigma who plans to be in Joshua Tree for like 2 hours, gets there right when the biggest monsoon in decades hits? No one is exempt. But in all seriousness, this kind of thing happens to people and can often be the cause of their deaths in one way or another. Obviously, it's not the case that a monsoon got Paul Miller, but he went to this same spot with the same confidence that I had that everything would go according to plan. But that's not always how things work out. If I had been on the trail, things would have probably been fine for me, but who knows? I stepped out into the quarter hail for just a moment, and it was pretty painful. It was relentless. I at least would have gotten severely beat up by the hail if I had stayed out on the trail because there was pretty much nowhere to run for cover unless you leave the trail entirely. But either way, I'm glad I wasn't out on the trail to find out what would have happened. But the footage exists as its own sort of lesson. So let's get back to the case at hand. We'll never be fully certain what made Paul Miller move off trail. It's possible he did this to try and get a picture of a sheep. Searchers in the area after he disappeared reported that there was sheep scat pretty much everywhere. It's also possible that he made his way off trail to find shade. There really isn't many places to get out of the beating sun while you're on this trail. Either way, he went off trail, and I believe he probably had some sort of medical event. Maybe it was difficult or near impossible for him to keep moving. It definitely seems like something incapacitated him. It's not all that common to find someone dead in the desert in a shaded spot with a liter of water. To me, that indicates some likelihood of a medical problem other than hyperthermia. You can't rule it out completely because things like dehydration can cause people to act rather strange in some cases. But to me, if he still had his wits about him enough to find shade, then you would think he could still drink some water too. It's mentioned that Paul didn't have a lot of experience in desert hiking, but I think he probably gained quite a bit on this trip. I mean, he had gone on many hikes during this trip and in very hot weather. He even did numerous hikes in Joshua Tree. He must have had some idea of what he was getting into and how it would feel. When all you have left is bones, you're almost always left with some sort of a mystery as to the cause of death. The fact is, this trail in the summer is dangerous. Any trail in extreme heat is. Because not only can it cause you to become hyperthermic, but it can also increase the odds of you having a sudden medical event. Unexpected things can happen suddenly in the worst places. I think that might be the lesson of this video. Still, I can see why a lot of people ask me to cover this one. When you look at it from a basic sense, there's only one trail in the area. It's not a particularly long hike. Paul was experienced. How could this happen? Hopefully, we've uncovered enough facts in this video to lead to a reasonable conclusion. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and until next time, thanks for watching. And don't forget to check out Scentbird to get 55% off your first month by scanning the QR code on screen or by going to Scentbird's website and using the promo code Enigma.